He walked out so quietly, you'd think he was only grabbing the mail, but this time the bags were full, and the front door slammed for what might be the last time. Meido is gone, leaving Debbie surrounded by the echoes of a house that was meant to be their new start together. This was the end of a 6-year marathon where every sweaty mile seemed to bring her closer to a real-life fairy tale, and it vanished in one brutally silent night. Try to picture this. 6 years clinging to someone's video call, whispering secrets across time zones, missing birthdays, holding out for a love that felt bigger than all those odds, and in a single evening, it's reduced to nothing but rumpled luggage and the sound of a cab pulling away. You ever wonder how it feels to watch your entire dream snap in half before your eyes? Debbie is left standing in that moment, blinking fast, her mind scrambling to replay every sweet beginning, every goodnight, every tear-stained phone call from all those years ago. It started like a plot out of a streaming rom-com, and oh, it was juicy enough for television. Debbie, 55, steady job, each day scribbled into a planner, meets Meido, a younger, ambitious Egyptian tour guide who turns every moment into a headline. 14 years between them, yes, but you could argue those weren't the biggest hurdles here. Debbie's friends called her daring, family was skeptical, but from the very first dinner Debbie was caught in that gold rush excitement. He was magnetic in the way people only are in movies, promising her the kind of adventure she'd spent decades daydreaming about from her kitchen table in New Orleans. But that charm came with a price tag. Meido's American dream wasn't white picket fences or crawfish on Sundays. It was bright lights, big additions, cameras flashing, and a never-ending reel of Hollywood ambitions that outshined anything the city could offer. Pretty soon, Debbie's new life started to feel like an endless round of auditions she never signed up for. She didn't even get the script. Meido's mood flipped faster than you could hit record. Optimistic one moment, restless the next, always with an eye on the next big break. The tension? You could feel it zipping through every conversation, and money just poured salt on every wound. Debbie found herself paying for plane tickets, acting classes, even going solo on bills because Meido insisted he was destined for the big stage and, in his words, regular work would crush his creativity. The argument started as whispers, then got loud enough to rattle the neighbors. Fans kept asking, was it ever love, or was Debbie the opening act before Meido's Hollywood story launched? You start to realize, looking back, that seeds of doubt were already sprouting those first few months, long before any camera crew showed up. There were late nights when Debbie waited up, heart-raising, but the biggest blowouts always happened behind closed doors. She caught herself bargaining with disappointment, trading hope for excuses, telling herself this was loyalty when, deep down, it was fear she'd been played. Anyone watching would be chewing their nails wondering if either of them saw the crash coming, or if they were both too dazzled by the lights to look down at the cracks below. And the wildest part? Nobody, not even the show's own crew, saw the real cliff edge they were racing toward. The fallout was about to get messier than anyone could predict, and trust me, if you think the packing of those bags was the biggest shock, wait until you hear what Debbie found out next. Everything started with a dream so glossy, even Debbie's close friends sometimes got swept up in it. She wanted love bigger than her zip code, to feel chosen and special, to laugh about distance and cultures as if those weren't mountains to climb. In some ways, she was chasing her own movie script, the classic it's never too late fantasy. What she didn't know was that Meido had his own script, and in his version, the final scene played out on a Hollywood stage, not her living room couch. Meido's hunger for a dazzling American dream was never a secret. He'd mention his film roles in Egypt, drop stories about cameras and fans as easily as other people talked about chores, and always tilt the conversation back to what he'd do once he landed in the US. He wanted billboards, not bayous. Debbie loved that glow. At first. Who doesn't want to partner with big goals, right? But soon, the shine faded, the lights got harsh, and real life knocked hard. At first, the missed job interviews felt like small hiccups. Meido's focus was acting, so maybe it made sense for him to skip those all-night restaurant shifts or pass up stable gigs for a shot in some casting office. Then it happened again. And again. Audition after audition with nothing to show except another ride home in silence and another bill unpaid on Debbie's kitchen counter. The story flipped. People started to notice. Friends at barbecues, neighbors who'd seen 100 couples fizzle out, even Debbie's own family started to ask, is he ever going to get a job, or is he just waiting for you to bankroll this whole adventure? Online, the whispers grew louder. Some called it brave for Debbie to defend Meido, to double down in public that this was real love, and you could see the exhaustion in her late-night replies to strangers throwing shade on social media. She wasn't a fool, but loyalty can make anybody look helpless in the wrong light. Protecting Meido from public criticism became her new routine. She rationalized the Hollywood thing as just a phase, his cold spells as artistic frustration, his bad moods as pressure from being an outsider. But each time she posted a cheerful photo or wrote a caption defending the man she swore would prove everyone wrong, Meido grew colder. His ambitions stretched further, out the door, out of their bed, out of their life, while Debbie did everything to keep the old spark alive. One night, he stormed away from a dinner with her friends so dismissively that the table sat silent for a full minute after. During small-town parties, Meido barely tried to hide his disdain for people he called ordinary. To him, Louisiana felt suffocating. He rolled his eyes at American traditions, made snide comments about how small people's dreams were, and always checked his phone for messages from anyone in LA. Debbie told herself every couple has rough spots. But she started to wonder if the rough spot was who they were together. Watching him hustle so hard for roles while refusing steady work was starting to wear the romance thin. Arguments stopped being about love and turned into standoffs over who was really sacrificing more. Meido's reluctance to work any job besides actor became bigger than the language barrier. It was a daily factor in every conversation. She'd catch him saying he was meant for more while expecting her to foot the bills. He grew more entitled, more certain that someday soon, the big call would come. And the story kept twisting. Fans began to notice the cracks. They saw Debbie sinking further into Meido's orbit, working longer hours, loaning him her car, making excuses for his moods. Whole online threads popped up dissecting every bit of their relationship, arguing over whether Debbie was delusional, too trusting, or maybe, just maybe, a hopeless romantic who wanted to believe in magic despite every red flag waving around her. Some said she had given up her backbone for a slim chance at forever. Others said she was the only one in the franchise ever willing to fight for her person against that much doubt. But there were moments of real pain hiding behind the memes and analysis. Debbie's eyes looked more tired in every episode, her optimism turning brittle. She slipped from plucky heroine to someone whose faith was beginning to shrink under the weight of Meido's indifference. You'd see little cracks at the edges, a laugh that sounded forced, shoulders pulled in tight. She tried to sell the dream hard on social media, but the walls in their house told a different story. Meanwhile, Meido's performing wasn't lighting up any rooms in LA. He faced one closed door after another, sometimes not even making it past the waiting room. He told Debbie the agents didn't get him, that he was too talented for these small parts, that Hollywood was threatened by his potential, never admitting that maybe ego was overshadowing effort. Each fresh rejection made him harsher to be around. Instead of humility, he doubled down on blaming Debbie for not doing enough, for holding him back, for being too small town. The reality was, every dream he'd sold her was built on borrowed time. By then, it was harder and harder not to see why those closest to Debbie were worried. Was she loyal or blinded? Was Meido really in love with her, or just desperate to get famous by any means necessary? The more one tried to rescue the other, the heavier their mess became. It was a masterclass in denial, heartbreak, and stubborn hope. Each time you thought Debbie would give up, she'd throw herself back into winning Meido over, chasing him through emotional wreckage, convinced if she just tried harder he'd see what he had. The wildest twist was still around the corner. While their season was burning up group chats and everyone assumed a split was inevitable, something nobody expected happened. Under a gray Louisiana sky, with nobody there but a courthouse official, Debbie and Meido made it legal. No gowns, no first dance, nothing to celebrate, Just a rushed courthouse marriage, hidden from friends, family, producers, even fans who'd watched every argument and assumed divorce was coming. That document changed everything and nothing. It was the most shocking move yet, and set both of them up for exactly the mess nobody saw coming next. The truth about why they did it was about to spill, and trust me, nobody was ready for the fallout from that secret wedding. The moment word got out, the internet turned feral. Within hours, there were memes flying, TikTok edits roasting awkward moments, and fans on every platform calling it the marriage no-K one visa could save. People combed through their Instagram likes, their old Facebook comments, even those blurry selfies from their first trip, searching for clues. Some accused Meido of using Debbie as a walking green card. Others said Debbie was in deep denial, clinging so hard to her fantasy she wouldn't see the truth if it danced in front of her wearing a sash and waving flags. The noise in the comment sections got ugly fast. You could see the split even among their few remaining real-life friends. Some dropped away quietly, texting less and less, while a handful stuck around, worried but powerless, watching their friend spin herself into heartbreak. Debbie fought back hard, always online, and always with a fast reply. She tried to keep the trolls at bay, writing long captions about how TV edits never show real feelings, explaining over and over Meido's dreams weren't wrong, just misunderstood. You almost wanted to believe her, scrolling past all that hope spelled out in caps lock, until you remembered the moments the cameras did catch, the tired eyes, the forced smiles, the way Debbie's voice would trail off when Meido interrupted or changed the subject. Those posts were a lifeline, a final stand. She told the world her man was no scammer, but each defense landed weaker than the last. At some point, the act felt more about convincing herself than anyone else. Things exploded off-screen too, and Halloween night was when it all boiled over. They showed up at a friend's house dressed as a mismatched Marilyn and James Dean, but there was no Hollywood romance in the air, only nerves frayed thin. There were jokes that landed flat, sideways glances across the punch bowl, and a cold distance that made the whole party feel off. The argument started before they even got in the car to go home, whispered jabs that grew sharper with every turn of the steering wheel. The drive was pitch dark and silent except for raised voices bubbling, then finally boiling over. It was ugly, the kind of fight that gets replayed more in your head afterward than on any DVR. Meido hissed insults so cruel even Debbie was shaken. She slammed the brakes mid-sentence, barely caring about the traffic behind her, yelling for him to get out if her love made him this unhappy. He called her pathetic. She snapped back, and in a burst of pure instinct, she kicked him out right on the shoulder of the road. Friends who heard the story later said it sounded like a movie scene, only without an audience, without anyone to clap or throw popcorn. That night changed everything. When Debbie drove off, she left a piece of herself in that car, the part that believed in second chances. The fallout hit hard. When Meido finally made it home that night, he was still fuming, spinning the story for anyone who'd listen about how Debbie was unstable, how she didn't get him or believe in his special talent. Meanwhile, Debbie got calls and texts from almost everyone she still trusted, but every time she tried to explain, she found herself making excuses for behavior that would have horrified her 6 years ago. The drama reached such a fever pitch that producers, who usually let chaos run its natural course, dropped their silent witness rule. When tempers flared, camera crews abandoned their boom mics and stepped straight into the chaos, pulling the couple apart, trying to get Meido out before anyone else got hurt. That had never happened before, even in the wildest seasons. It was one of those moments that changes a reality show from cautionary entertainment into a warning sign blinking for anyone paying attention. But why did Debbie stay? Why send angry replies to strangers, defend a man who seemed to grow meaner each day, let herself become the punchline of a season? The answer lived somewhere between hope and survival. A lot of people love the version of someone that only exists in their own heads, the one who promises to change or love harder if you just stick it out. Debbie convinced herself she was being loyal, but loyalty without boundaries looks a lot like self-abandonment. Each nasty fight revealed how the line between love and illusion can shrink until you mistake control for reassurance and silence for stability. Staying became a habit harder to break than any old routine. Nothing about that courthouse wedding softened Meido. The marriage license should have been security, or at least a reset, but their dynamic stayed stuck in the spin cycle. Debbie tried using legality as a shield. Now he'll stay, now he'll invest, now he'll put roots down. Meido, on the other hand, acted colder than before, almost spiteful, as if cementing this bond only made him feel more boxed in. He stopped trying for auditions, stopped apologizing for skipping out on dinner, stopped showing up in any way that mattered. Debbie's isolation was the final stage, friends weaning off calls, her family growing tired of worry, and social media tossing memes faster than she could ban the word green card. What started as a fairy tale ended in an echo chamber. Meido's suitcase sat at the door for days before he said a word, the tension in the house freezing over like a silent storm. Debbie's hope thawed into numbness, and when the news finally broke that he was set to fly back to Egypt, she was too tired to argue, her strength gone as quietly as her dreams. The only thing left was the question no one in her inner circle could answer: how much heartbreak does it take before you finally let go? Something in Debbie's eyes said she was about to find out. Meido's dreams started to look ragged around the edges by the time another casting call turned him down. Every single audition felt like another lock clicking shut on a door he thought would swing wide open for him. Early on, they celebrated every invitation, Meido working his charm in front of any agent who'd watch, but the answers were always the same: thanks, but no. The dream roles he promised he'd land slipped through his fingers. He blamed his accent, said the industry wasn't fair, but at home the resentment swelled like a storm. Debbie watched the hope drain from his eyes and felt its weight double on her shoulders every time he offered another excuse. Money grew tight, then it turned ugly. Rent checks bounced, utility bills stacked up unopened. Debbie worked overtime just to cover groceries, all while Meido insisted it was only a matter of months before Hollywood called him back. When she asked him to pick up part-time shifts, it always spiraled into a fight. He'd accuse her of doubting him, and she'd swallow her growing frustration because she still pictured them walking red carpets, still believed there was a future if she held on tightly enough. But the cost of hope gets higher when only one person is paying. Behind closed doors, fights got quieter but crueler. Meido's disappointment didn't show up as sadness, but as cold criticism. He'd spent his charm, and what was left wasn't pretty. Whenever he looked at Debbie, she saw calculation, not devotion. She recognized the manipulative tactics after a while, the silent treatment when he wanted something, the sudden bursts of affection when he thought she might walk out, the constant reminders about everything he'd sacrificed to be with her. Each instance pushed her closer to a truth she'd been refusing to face for months. Most heartbreak doesn't hit as a single explosion. It's the steady drip of little betrayals that finally drown you. The public found out soon enough that the dream was dead. Debbie used to keep things private, but nobody can hide sadness like that for long. Friends who distanced themselves slowly trickled back into the story, this time with more concern than judgment. Some sent quiet support, others dropped off groceries, or left cheerful voicemails just to fill the silence. Strangers online shifted from outrage to sympathy, flooding comment sections with stories of their own heartbreaks, their own versions of loving too hard for too long. Instead of memes, people started sharing warnings and what they wished they'd known threads. Realizing that none of her sacrifice made any difference landed harder than any insult. Debbie watched 6 years turn to dust, birthdays spent alone, her savings drained, her reputation tied to a relationship she never dreamed would end with her partner halfway out the door before the marriage certificate ink was dry. The cruelest part was how fast it happened. One moment she was standing in her kitchen, still planning their future, and the next she was searching flight confirmation numbers in Meido's email, piecing together the truth herself. The goodbye that should have been a scene, tears, hugs, apologies never came. All she got was a note on the fridge and a voicemail meant for nobody. He left the way he'd always lived, hungry for the next story. That one-way ticket to Egypt meant more than an escape for him. Maybe it was a reset button, or at least an admission that the American version of himself wasn't going to happen. No apologetic text, no airport goodbye, just the whine of suitcase wheels rolling down the curb. That's what struck her the most. Meido left before the story resolved, leaving Debbie and half the fans still watching, without closure. Sometimes endings don't even bother with the final chapter. If you think about it, Debbie's collapse was public, but Meido's was personal. He quit before he was fired, rewriting the narrative in his own head. Maybe she could have cut him loose sooner, saved herself the humiliation, the bills, the heartbreak. How many red flags does it take before you stop hoping for a miracle? Some viewers will see loyalty in her, others only stubbornness. There's a fine line between giving someone your all and losing yourself completely in someone else's dream. Why are we drawn to stories like this, anyway? Maybe part of us loves watching people risk it all, hoping they'll succeed where we might have failed. It's comforting, the idea that love is worth agony, that fairy tales can have ugly chapters. We watch hoping for a lesson, a counterpart to our own what-ifs. The show doesn't just hand us a spectacle, it asks us to sit with our own choices, the lines we draw, and the dreams we eventually let go. For Debbie, the lesson isn't sweet or wrapped in a bow. She's left in an empty house, surrounded by reminders of a love story nobody believed at the end, not even her. Her friends have learned to call again, her family picks up the pieces gently, and fans argue in the comments about whether she'll ever trust anyone that much again. Meido's gone for good, and only the aftershocks remain, echoing through those freshly quiet rooms. If heartbreak has a sound, it's the slow exhale when you realize it's over, for real, this time. Yet somewhere, with every heartbreak, there's a question. Does healing start when the leaving ends, or when you finally accept they're never coming back? The answer is never simple, and for Debbie, it's still out there, waiting on the other side of goodbye. The fallout felt both deafening and quiet for Debbie. After the airport episode, her life split into before and after, each day measured in small recoveries and fresh reminders. The same people who once doubted her motives now found themselves equal parts furious on her behalf and strangely hopeful. Fans who'd spent months roasting every decision she made now posted long threads about second chances, about the ways heartbreak can clear the ground for something new to grow. There were nights she sat awake, phone lighting up with strangers' encouragement, 1,000 tiny kindnesses that almost made up for the humiliation of having her worst moments replayed for all of America. Pain and relief ran side by side. Debbie grieved things in odd little ways. The coffee mug Meido never put away, the shelf of DVDs he never watched, the promises that collapsed without warning. But deep down, below the exhaustion and regret, she also felt something else trickle in. Freedom. No more additions. No more explaining herself to people who'd already decided what kind of fool she must be. If public embarrassment is one part heartbreak and one part forgiveness, Debbie was already learning how to let her own mistakes fade into memory. Free from the endless cycle of Hollywood dreams and harsh letdowns, she no longer had to defend fantasy against reality. Her story was now in her own hands, at last. Questions about her future rushed in faster than answers. Friends asked, will she ever trust again? Or will every new romance look like a ticking time bomb? Even extended family, after months of eye-rolling, grew gentle, helping her rekindle the versions of herself that never depended on anyone's approval. Social media became both sanctuary and minefield. With every new DM and tagged post, Debbie saw the evidence of just how many people out there had their own Meido, their own disastrous partnership, and their own lessons about where love slips into survival. Public records never lie, and when gossip blogs dug up their courthouse wedding certificate, fans couldn't believe it. The dates didn't match the narrative, and suddenly debate exploded again, this time about whether Debbie had ever had a chance at happiness with someone so skilled at rewriting history. A grainy scan of their signed marriage license trended on reality TV forums for weeks, dissected by armchair investigators until even the smallest detail felt worn out. Yet, reading the commentary, Debbie spotted the same note over and over. People want someone to root for, someone to survive. No matter how messy, every audience still wants a comeback. Then came the unexpected new headlines, mere days after the dust began to settle. Some reports said Meido had gone back to Cairo, picked up with old actor friends, posted cryptic photos from shiny restaurants that made it look like nothing had ever happened. Fans brought their screenshots, trying to decode whether he'd learned anything or if fame was still his white whale. He'd replied to only a handful of DM requests, always in vague, positive language, never once mentioning Debbie or the show. Speculation grew. Was this a clean break or the start of another loop? Meanwhile, Debbie surprised everyone with her own update. She started posting dog park photos, snapshots with friends she hadn't seen in years, little glimpses of life outside old heartbreak. There were rumors she'd gone back to night classes, picking up skills put on hold during her relationship, maybe even planning a trip overseas with her sister. This time, nobody else's schedule to worry about. Even the tone of her posts shifted, blossoming from apology to gratitude, as if she was finally giving herself credit for all the ways she tried to make love work, flawed as it was. Shows like this rarely let stories rest. By the time fans finished arguing over who is hero and who is villain, new faces had already captured everyone's imagination, a couple even wilder than Debbie and Meido, the promise of even more epic drama and sudden heartbreak. Still, the question lingered. Do these shows teach us to expect the worst from love? Or is there something hopeful in watching people risk it all, mess up, and still come out breathing? Even through the cringe, you sense it. The urge to believe again, to root for someone's next chapter, even if it means watching another train wreck from behind a pillow. This episode never gave easy answers, but it left an impression. Fans saw more than a breakup. They saw the reality behind the hashtags, the cost of chasing a fairy tale, and the relief that can come from setting an old dream down. Debbie's chapter might be closing, but someone else is about to put everything on the line for their own wild version of happiness. Sometimes, all it takes to start over is the pain that finally gets you to let go. If you're ready to see what fresh heartbreak looks like, the next story is about to turn everything you thought you knew about love upside down. Stay tuned for a couple whose secrets might break the internet before they even say I do.